clearly you've been doing your homework on this because you are unbelievably good at communicating. There's a part in what you've just been saying. We probably won't have this even in the video version because we usually just cut to the guest speaking, or whoever's speaking is typically what's showing on the video. But I was just kind of like leaned back in my chair, like just really enjoying listening to you speak. So I don't know how exactly you're doing it. I guess I have to read the book to get all of the details on that. But I was just
So,
wow, I am so entertained as I'm learning.
so let's talk about a couple of things there. One,
Okay.
thank you. That's super complimentary. I wasn't always this way. And I think that's
I know we
part
actually dug that up in
of
our research. I was going to have that
you
later
found
on.
some really awful old recording or something. Like, look at her. She's
we're
shaking that
gonna
belief.
we're gonna make you watch some really bad recordings and get your reactions on air. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Anecdote came to my mind. I won't share it now. Um, No, I certainly wasn't. I mean, I am naturally an introvert. My comfortable place is in a room by myself, behind my computer screen, right? I'm trained as a mathematician. Like none of these scream extrovert. But it was when I got really excited about the power of being able to make a good graph, honestly, that enthusiasm started becoming contagious. Happiness, enthusiasm is a very contagious thing, right? And so that's one trick is when you are communicating about something, you have to be genuinely interested in it. Because if you aren't, there is no way you're going to get other people interested in it. And so I think it was my enthusiasm and my passion that carried me through at first because those presentations had to be awful. And I never breathed deeply enough, so my voice would shake. I couldn't ever hold a piece of paper in my hand because my hands would be shaking. But the passion for it, and then I got the opportunity to take a course when I was at Google and starting to teach, which was, how do you teach adult learners? We recorded ourselves. So I picked up or I picked out, I should say, some bad habits there that I curbed. But then it's really this practice of doing and being a careful observer every time and understanding how little things can make a really big difference. And for me, this has been the most fascinating part, I think, of my job, my role as I look back over the past decade plus. Because at first it was about getting the lessons right, getting the material right, getting the slides right, having those be perfect. But once
mhm.
that was done and I knew my stuff there, then I got to be this really conscious observer, both observing myself and how what I would do in a room would impact other people. But then also, the really cool thing you get when you're talking to other people is real time data. You get immediate feedback from them in terms of their facial expressions, their body language, right? Like you said, are they sitting back? Are they leaning forward? Are they smiling? Are they nodding? Are they with you? Are they not? And I started to make connections between how I could do things that would change that response. So, for example, where I stand in a room. If I want engagement in the back of the room, I can walk as a speaker back there and it happens. Or, as you see somebody get out their phone in the right scenario, you can just walk closer to that person as you're talking. And that becomes really uncomfortable when they feel all the eyes in the room shift towards them. Or it's interesting you're talking about, you're talking and I just want to listen. So much of that is simply how I've learned to use my voice. Cadence, it's volume, it's I'm genuinely interested in what I'm saying, and that comes through in the sound. I'll speed up if something gets important and get loud and use my hands, and that's exciting. Or so you can play with these things, and it is this superpower that is so underutilized. And it's not about overdoing it. I get dramatic when I'm doing it, and particularly in ways where it's to try to bring attention to it. And it doesn't mean you have to be overly dramatic to get your point across. Or, if you're thinking of written words, it drives me nuts, right? If every sentence ends in an exclamation point, like you don't want to sound like every sentence ends in an exclamation point. It's the variety that can help keep people interested and listening and waiting to see what you're going to say next. And it takes practice. You see that? Yeah. Pausing is a phenomenal tool that if anyone is at all nervous
I wish I
or
had the
going too
guts.
fast, what?
Yeah,
Say it.
it takes such guts to do that,
To
to
pause.
pause, yeah.
Oh, it's so fun though. And it's one of those things, once you start doing it, you almost can't stop because it's super fun. So, what I used to have to do is count in my head. And particularly when you are giving an instruction. So, if I'm giving a presentation or a workshop or anything, right? But I'm the one speaking and I'm going to give you an instruction to do something. You, on the receiving end of that, have to be listening, take that in, decide whether you're going to do anything with it or not, and then maybe participate. So there's this whole lag that happens. If you do a lot of stuff video, by the way, you get really comfortable with this. Like one of the platforms we use, there's like a 30-second delay. So it's like you put the thing out there and then you keep talking or you do other things to fill the time because you know that by the time if somebody's going to chat back, they have to receive the instruction, take the time to process it, figure out if they're going to do anything with it, then type, and then there's the actual delay. And so back to my point, if you are putting something out there and looking for a response, you have to pause because it takes longer than you think it's going to for somebody else to fill that space that you're giving them. And so when you're starting to get comfortable with it, counting, right? Count slowly to 10. I mean, count to 20 if
Whoa.
you can. And then when you get
Whoa.
comfortable, now it's like I'll pause and just call out the fact that pauses don't make me uncomfortable. So I'm actually going to remain quiet here until somebody says something. And it only usually takes, the first person or two or somebody to break that silence. And then it gives people time. One way, by the way, if that makes you really uncomfortable, is you can think about how do you fill that time so that someone can decide whether they're going to participate. And this is similar to that scenario I was describing where you've got like the 30-second lag, where you can pose a question or pose a thing you're going to want input on, and then start by sharing your own thought or your own input or your own anecdote that's related, and then turn it back over so that you've already given people basically a buffer in which to think about that. Or you prompt people ahead of time or before you're taking a break or something like that. So that there are things you can do to reduce the friction there. But pauses, once you start doing it, are fun. They're like the punctuation of your spoken word. And especially for people who struggle with filler words, pausing is such a great way to slow yourself down, help your mouth catch up with your mind. And if I'm speaking and people are tuned into me and I'm sort of really,
I
that's
I
awful.
I
Versus if
just
I
realized
pause
I just
until my mind lands on the word I want or suitable substitute, that sounds thoughtful. So
Mhm.
slowing down so that you can be more refined, maybe.
You're
I don't know,
so
all
good
these
at not
things.
doing filler words. I just noticed that, like, I just did one. Although it was almost a simile. I just noticed that you haven't like done it at all.
Well, it's funny. And in a scenario like this, so with filler words, practice not using them. But once you get in a thing, try not, because if you catch yourself using them, if you're too conscious of it in the real thing, then that can be kind of there's one of my downward spiral. And what has happened, I do use filler words, but they've gotten slightly more graceful over time. I almost just used one there. And I did just there. So starting a sentence with so, right? That never needs to
Yeah,
happen. Ending
right,
a sentence with right.
right.
Maybe sounds like I'm trying to involve you in the conversation, but also completely unnecessary. It's clear that we're having
Mhm.
a conversation, even if I don't ask a question at the end of every statement. But yes, I've
Do you
curved the ums and the ahs for the most part. It took a long
so
time.
on that point specifically, on curbing the ums and the ahs, how do you recommend that people get rid of that? I mean, asking for a friend.
Sure. Recording yourself is a fantastic way to, even if you know you're using filler words, to fully recognize how detrimental they can be because you hear yourself saying them. I think it's very easy for people to excuse their use of filler words with the excuse, but I sound conversational. Like,
Mm.
yeah, no, don't.
It's never
Like,
better, is
you
it?
want to sound like a poor conversationalist? No.
My
But when
conversation
you can
style
hear
is poor.
is filler words. Yeah. No, but when you record yourself, so for example, I mentioned when I was at Google and took a course on teaching adults. And so as part of this, we recorded ourselves. And I caught myself, I was wearing high heels at the time, which I almost always do when I present. And I was rocking back and forth, had no idea that I was doing this. And had somebody given me the feedback, hey, Cole, plant your feet. When you're rocking, it's super distracting. I would have been like, whatever, it's fine. But seeing myself do it, it's like, ooh, that's really distracting. I'm going to stop immediately. And I did. And I think filler words can be the same. What I recommend doing with filler words, or when you are evaluating a recording for how you speak, actually don't watch it, just listen, because that will give you a really clear, sort of clean understanding of how you sound, which, particularly useful in a scenario like this where you're going to be going on a podcast and people are mostly listening to that, because then you can pick out not only what words you tend to migrate to, but also when. Oftentimes it is when your brain and your mouth are out of sync and you're trying to catch up. And so you're trying to find that next word. And so pausing can be useful there. I think in important scenarios where the stakes are high, doing some rehearsing ahead of time is great. You don't ever want the first time you say words in an important setting to be in the important setting. And
Mm.
rehearsing, I would say not to memorize. Memorizing is risky because if you forget the thing, it throws you all off, but to commit certain things to memory. So, for example, I'll often, if I'm getting ready to do a keynote or some sort of big presentation, even for a podcast, if I'm the one hosting and it's video and I don't want to have notes, I will commit to memory the things, like the main points that I want to cover in the first couple of minutes. So basically the introduction. And I will talk about those aloud several times. And it can be a little different every time. You want it to be a little different every time, because what's happening then is my brain is establishing different pathways for me to get, if there are 3 points I want to hit, it's giving me different pathways to get there. And I'm articulating the transitions between them, which can make things feel really smooth. And so, particularly in a scenario, if there are any nerves involved, committing to memory how you're going to approach things or the main things you want to hit in those first few minutes will get you past your nerves. And then you'll be able to speak more eloquently because you will have settled in. So some of these things you can do to trick the things you know that are happening. And these are the sort of things that I've played with over time. For example, if I'm teaching a full day workshop, I know if I eat anything during the lunch break, after lunch, I'm going to have a hard time catching my breath. Do you know why?
Oh, really?
Because my body is digesting food and it's hard to breathe deeply when your body's digesting food. So what do? Like, you can do a couple things, right? I can eat less during lunch. I'll make sure I eat in like the first part of the hour. I also reconstructed how I typically do things after lunch. So it's discussion, not me lecturing. By the way, I
Genius.
will share this anecdote that popped into my mind earlier because it's more relevant here, but we were talking about comments and feedback that you get, and particularly that of the negative sort on videos and books and things. And one that sticks with me is I did an author talk at Google shortly after my first book came out, and Google posted it. And so it's been viewed a lot and has a ton of comments. But one of the negative ones is, she can't even catch her breath. But then it was fun to watch because then somebody else responded back and it was like, she's pregnant, you idiot. Like, yeah, you can no longer fully breathe because your diaphragm gets pushed up. Like, so I was happy that somebody else knew why.
It is really nice when that happens on a YouTube video or something.